If you've experienced something unbelievably weird and unexplainable that left you feeling isolated and afraid, the Paranormal PTSD Recovery Podcast is for you. Each week, we go from haunting to healing by focusing on one of our 3 core focal points: personal stories, healing tips, and understanding the unknown. We help you to know that you're not crazy, you're not alone, and you can heal. Now here's your hostess, Laura Giles. Yvonne Smith is with me here today, and Yvonne is a certified hypnotherapist, an abduction researcher who has been working with paranormal PTSD sufferers since 1991. She's the founder of Close Encounter Research Organization, which is now called Close Encounter Resource Organization, and she also hosts the Abduction Therapist Training Workshop. So I can't wait to hear what Yvonne has to say about her experience in this area. Welcome, Yvonne.
Thank you, Laura, for having me on the show.
Sure. So can we start by telling me about the first time when you were working with somebody with PTSD and you thought, I think this person was abducted by aliens?
Well, I didn't start out working working with people with PTSD. When I was working at the clinic where I did my training, I started out working with cancer patients.
Oh.
And that's actually what I was going to specialize in, because I had a very close uncle to me die at 45 years old of cancer. And I wish I had the training, to ease his pain and worry, and, giving him an easy transition. But that inspired me to seek out hypnotherapy. Besides, when I went to see Bud Hopkins, who's, if somebody doesn't know who that is, he's considered the pioneer of abduction research. And I went to see him. It was towards late 80s. He was lecturing close to my home. At the time, they were doing the Whole Life Expos all over the country. And, I was so interested in what he was saying. And I was, I couldn't believe what he was talking about. And he was showing drawings of, the abductees that were remembering certain things, the way the aliens looked or the way the craft looked. And so that also inspired me to seek out hypnotherapy colleges. And I started going and did my entire year, and gaining my hours in the clinic. And so when I opened up my practice, it was basically, working with the cancer patients. And I was doing, basically, weight loss and smoking and all of that you learn. But it wasn't until I began meeting people in the UFO field. I went to my first conference back then and started meeting people after I became certified hypnotherapist. And I began receiving referrals because, at that time, that was 1991, and even now, but back then there wasn't really anybody doing this. And I was on the West Coast. So that's when I discovered, and I remember my very first client. He was professional, an engineer. And of course, these experiences start way back in childhood. So we went back to his childhood, and, of course, a whole scenario came out. But as I was working, the more I was working with these cases, then I realized that my main objective as a therapist is to relieve them from the PTSD symptoms, because they're, they can't sleep, they're hypervigilant, they have, nightmares and vivid dreams, and it affects their concentration, where then it starts affecting their work. So, for me, I feel like getting people to live their life, because we all have to live our lives, pay our bills, pay our taxes, no matter what. And then the research comes in, then let's see what's happening here. So now I have, 33 years of experience and, hundreds of cases. And I realized, I felt back, many years ago that if I felt I was not helping people, if I felt they're coming out of these sessions even more traumatized, I wouldn't continue doing this for, 3 decades. But I saw all the healing, received letters back then, and now, emails, just saying, I don't know what I would have done. Thank you. And a lot of these people, they considered suicide because they felt, gosh, am I going crazy? Nobody believes me. All of these things. So, it's quite a responsibility to work with abduction cases. And since 2021, I started teaching workshops for therapists who expressed interest in bringing in, working with abduction cases along with their regular, caseload. So I'm teaching the next one. I do it twice a year, in spring and then in fall. My next one will be on the weekend of September 14th and 15th. And for information, all the details are on my website, hypnotherapist YvonneSmith.com. And email me if you're interested. It's so important now. We really need trained therapists. My April class, I had 3 therapists from other countries. So it was wonderful because I teach it on Zoom. It was wonderful because this is a worldwide experience. So
Absolutely.
I feel like, the more therapists get trained, the better, because it's what's happening now. People are becoming more and more awakened to the fact that maybe I've had these experiences. Maybe those things I saw as a child weren't ghosts or whatever they thought. And I receive inquiries from new people every single week. And these, from all over the country, all over the United States, and also in other countries. So it's, I felt an urgency back then in 2021 to begin to train therapists. I wanted to start in 2020, but then we had COVID and we couldn't get together. So they are working out very well. Their word is spreading where people are, have heard about it and they want to sign up for the classes. So I'm just, very encouraged about how these classes are going.
Yeah, there's definitely a shortage of qualified personnel to
Absolutely.
work with this. So when somebody comes to you for help, do they know that they were abducted, or is this something that they discover along the way?
They don't, they have a hint. They're not sure. The way that, the subconscious works is anytime any of us experience any kind of trauma, the subconscious will protect us. It'll either block off all of it or some of it. And even if it blocks out all of it 100% for a while, eventually bits and pieces of memory will start coming up, bubbling up. That's how the subconscious works. It starts letting out these little hints of something. So they're not sure. And what's haunting to them is that, they know something happened, but what? I mean, especially people that are experiencing missing time. They're not asleep, they're driving or whatever they're doing, and they cannot remember an hour or two. They remember maybe arriving home later than they were supposed to. And that is very, very, I've not experienced myself missing time, but I can't even imagine all of a sudden you're home and you're supposed to be home at, 10 o'clock, but it's midnight and you don't remember what happened to you. We may think, oh my God, did somebody kidnap me and let me go? You just, you're not going to people aren't going to think I must have been abducted. That's not the first thought that
Right.
comes to them. They remember sometimes seeing an object in the sky, per se, maybe a bright light. Sometimes a bright light shines down on their car. Not always. I mean, these are just different scenarios that I've worked with. That's all they remember. They don't remember
Hmm.
pulling over. They don't remember, or the a classic one is they're driving and they see ahead of them is flashing lights, like there was an accident that happened. First responders are there and they're thinking, oh my gosh, and so they kind of slow down and they're passing it. And once they passed it, it's like they don't remember anything else. And that's when they, some of them have arrived home later than expected, but they don't remember except for that accident, that they passed by. So it's very disturbing. Um,
Hmm.
so they finally, back when I started, 1991, we didn't have the internet like it is now. There were some books out there, but it was really difficult to, where do you reach out? Where do you go to, you couldn't look at the yellow pages, or it's not going to be, people aren't going to be in there. Now it's a little bit easier because we have things like Facebook and all the others. I'm on Facebook only because I want to make sure people can reach me. And this has been, a few years ago. And I'm on LinkedIn, I think. I'm just there so that if people punch in my name, then I have my website. So at this day and age, it's much easier to be in contact with somebody. It back when I started, I mean, it was phone calls, it was referrals, really. I had people, I knew the editors from UFO magazine, and
Oh,
I put a little print ad in there at that time. So I thought, okay, maybe people will see this, but really, over these years, it's all been through referrals, and then now, of course, my website, and then now, another one is YouTube. Like, oh, I saw you, being interviewed on YouTube, or that's how they can reach out to people now. It's so, I mean, back then in the late 80s, early 90s, we had no idea that
yeah.
technology was going to be the way it is now. And of course, with Zoom, to reach out to people all over the US and Europe, and other countries. And I only started doing Zoom sessions during COVID. I never
Hmm.
wanted to be right there present with my clients, and I still do many, many in-person sessions. But with Zoom, I'm able to reach out to people that most of them tell me, "Oh, there's no support group here. We don't have a hypnotherapist here. They don't know where to go." So thankfully, I'm able to reach out by Zoom. And I feel like, okay, COVID may have brought on some positive things, because I started doing Zoom sessions, and now I do a Zoom support group meeting that I started during COVID because, we couldn't get together. And I'm still continuing that as well as my in person meetings. So the work keeps me pretty busy.
I'm sure that there's still some people out there who don't believe that aliens and abduction are real,
Right.
but after doing this for a while,
Yeah.
it is. There's just
Yeah.
patterns, and too
Oh,
many
yeah.
people have the same types of stories. So, can you share one of your most memorable cases?
I think what the case that put it on the map for me was when I started working with Jesse Long, and I only say people's names when they give me permission to say them. It was a case of a double abduction of the two brothers, Jesse and his brother John Long. I worked with Jesse for many years when he lived here in Southern California. He worked in the film industry, and he did many sessions with me, but he never told his brother about he told him about the sessions, but not the details of the sessions. Because I always tell people, if they have witnesses with them, do not talk about the details that come out in hypnosis because you'll contaminate the case. It's not until we're
Hmm.
all done. So on finally, after many years, and this happened to them when they were 4 and 5 years old. Now, these abduction cases do occur in early childhood. They start in early childhood usually, and then they follow the person throughout their lives. So Jesse always wanted his brother to do hypnosis, but you can't force somebody if they don't want to do it. And a lot of them are afraid of hypnosis. But one day, this was in mid 90s. One day, John called Jesse and said, I think I'm going to see if there is anything to what we remembered as kids. But he had no interest in it. He had no interest in UFOs and, before then. So Jesse told me is that we've got to book the first flight out, that we were going back to Tennessee. We went out. I stayed at his parents' house in their spare room. Oh, just wonderful people. And I did John's hypnosis in that spare room. And when I compared their conscious memory when they were little boys playing in the sandbox and they both saw this man standing on the hill holding something, and they got out of the sandbox and they start walking because they were in their backyard. They both saw men working around a round house. Now that's what we call screen memory. When people think, "Oh, that's what I saw," men were working around this round house. Well, their memory stops there. Just stops there. So the whole scenario came out with Jesse all the times I worked with him. So when I started regressing John, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I never know what's going to happen. And really, many times, something, may not come out at all in hypnosis. We just don't know. But it started off slow, but then, he talked about their walking up there. He saw the man, and like they both said, it looked like the man was going to throw this hatchet at them. He raised his hand like this. Same thing as Jesse said, and then John started talking about they were both escorted to this round house. John was taken to one side of the, well, say, craft, turned out to be a craft, and then Jesse was taken on the other side. And so, going through that whole scenario, John could hear Jesse in the other side of the craft upset. They were examining him, and John had gone with this tall, very tall being that looked more like, people will describe them as looking like a praying mantis. But during his session, he called it a grasshopper. And we regress them back to them being 5 years old. So he called it a grasshopper. So it's pretty similar. And so Jesse went through that whole examination part of it. John, he was worried about his brother, and because the beings will describe or communicate telepathically, they knew that John was concerned, and all he heard was, "Your brother is going to be okay." And then he called that tall grasshopper his friend, and he said his friend taught him how to fly. And I asked him, well, can you describe it? Or however I asked him, he said he gets this feeling in his stomach, and then he's able to levitate. And I found that when children are taken up to the craft, they go through a school, like a class, and they're shown how to levitate objects, just with their mind, just concentrating. They're shown different type of toys that we don't even know what they are down here to levitate them. So he said I learned how to fly. And what was really interesting, that night we were sitting in the kitchen with their mother, and Catherine said, "Oh yeah, Johnny always told me he knew how to fly as a little boy." I went, "Oh my God," because she didn't know what happened in the session, but she just remembered he always said he could fly. And I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
And then I did a second session with him because I think I stayed there a couple days. That's what, their conscious memory was the same. The information that came forward in hypnosis was the same. They both came away with implants. One was on Jesse's left not thigh, ankle, shin, and John still has his behind his earlobe. I think his left one
So
behind the earlobe.
these were medically located?
Yeah, Jesse had his removed in the late 80s. He's had it analyzed. Now, this case is in my book, Chosen. So it's a very, very detailed case. And so it's you could get more details in there and the analysis of Jesse's implant. And when you see his implant, I have pictures of it in the book, it looks like just a shard of glass. But then when you put it under a spectroscope or microscope, it takes on a honeycomb texture and look, and it has minerals in it, things that a shard of glass does not have. It also, they said, it also emits radio waves. Now with John, we had located a doctor in Tennessee that was going to remove it.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss the show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you.
And then I was going to fly out there again, for his surgery. But then John called me and said he changed his mind, that he didn't want to have it removed. And I said, well, why? What happened? And he said, after that session, those sessions I did with him, awakened him, and he started receiving information, mathematical formulas. And he said that it was an agreement he had with his tall friend that if, they implant him, then they will give him information as the years go by. So he had applied for different patents for inventions. A round house that they saw in their conscious memory, John actually started building a roundhouse way before I even did any hypnosis with him. And that was, he didn't realize it at the time, but they were communicating to him about building it. And like I said, there's a lot of detail. Afterwards, the show back in the 90s, one of them called Encounters. They found out about the case. They contacted me and they said, we'd like to, fly you back out to Tennessee to do another session with John, and we'd like to film it. And so we did that, and they put together a real nice segment, I think 30-minute segment about the case. And I think people can find it on YouTube now. But it was, and sometimes I present it during my lectures when I talk about, say, a double abduction, because it's, there was so much detail that they put it together nicely for everybody. So that, when I was flying back home with Jesse after John's session and all the information that came forward, I realized, oh my God, this is real. Because neither brother would have made this up. I've known Jesse for many years. I know he wouldn't perpetrate a hoax, and for what, and John as well. He wasn't even interested, but he didn't realize why he was building the round house. And then when you see it as it was being built, Jesse said he couldn't believe, he got chills, because it was exactly what they had described from their conscious memory. That's what put it together for me, really. And I realized there were many multiple witness cases. They're not rare. This happens all the time. I wrote a book called Coronado about a mass abduction of 12 people that happened on Coronado Island in San Diego, California. People in that case, they saw each other on the craft. It was a real huge craft. the beings seemed that they were prepared because we were doing I was an MC for a UFO conference at that time. So they knew where we were going to be, and they abducted all these people. They were all part of my support group, and they remember seeing each other on the craft. That's another one. That's another big case that I worked with, and I realized because in the beginning you think, how could this be true? This is how could this happen? But when you start working and you start with people research, and if you really want to research it, it just, with all the similarities and with people that don't know each other,
Yeah.
It's you realize this is very real. It's a physical um, it's a physical experience. People come back with scars and marks on their bodies that were not there the night before.
Mm-hmm.
They have very vivid dreams. That's how the subconscious works. It'll bring up information in vivid dreams or a flashback times. So they kind of, that's what gives them a hint in the beginning that, gosh, did something happen? Was that, what was that light in the sky? Or, they just start questioning. Or the bedroom visitations when they think, why was I paralyzed? I couldn't move. And then they couldn't remember anything after that. And, so these memories, these bits and pieces of memories are, can be very disturbing to people.
Mm-hmm.
And, people have come to me, and they're still coming to me, with wanting to look into sessions, into experiences that happened 20, 30 years ago. That's
Yeah.
how long they realize, Dean, there's more information now that we have the internet, that they realize, oh my gosh, I wonder if that's what happened to me.
Now,
So
do your clients report other beings besides the praying mantises?
the small gray beans, and then the taller grays, the praying mantis type, the very human looking beings that are most likely the hybrids, the
Ah.
perfected hybrids. They'll see maybe light beings, and they'll see these beings many times working on the same ship.
And are they pro-human or are they dangerous?
Well, people, people ask me all the time, are they good? Are they bad? I never felt that with the beings that I've been in contact with, that I'm used to working with, with all these cases and all the similarities, they're not, they're not evil. They're not coming down and taking these people for evil purposes. They have an agenda, and they're carrying out the agenda. And I feel that it's the hybridization program that's very central to all of this. They're not this time going to come down and try to save us from ourselves, because they always say they can't interfere. But I would not call them evil.
So, what's your take on hybrids, and what is that for? What's the purpose?
Creating part alien, part human. The purpose, the end game, I don't know. I don't have an answer yet. All I know is they are at this time walking among us. People feel that they have come across a hybrid, and you could walk by them and not even know. But it's that when you stop and engage with them and they're talking to you, it's how they're engaging with the person. It's almost like they could see right through you, almost like reading your mind. There's something very different about them. But they're so perfected now that they blend in. And but I don't feel, even at this point, 3 decades later, that they're here to take us over, anything like that. I feel they still need us for our DNA and for our sperm and eggs and whatever else. So I don't have that scenario maybe as other researchers might, that, eventually they're going to take us all over.
So do hybrids know they're hybrids?
Yes. Yes, they do.
Okay.
Some may not, but the ones that have engaged with people, they seem to know that they are. Also, the beings will manipulate women. They'll manipulate the fetus in utero. So a lot of these babies are born. And they're very, very advanced and very intelligent and psychic, and so, and I think they were different labels. Was it Indigo Kids or Star Kids? I think we're all talking about the same thing. We still don't, at some point, I'm hoping that we can get tested where there could be something in the DNA or in the blood that they've never seen before. What is this? We'll probably get to that point. The way science is advancing, the way technology is advancing. So, we'll see. But I just feel they've been doing that program. I think that program is very important to them. People have been taken up periodically onto the craft and shown their own children, and are told that they must bond with these children for them to survive, because the beings don't seem to have that capability to bond like we do. They'll be observed. They'll have the person maybe holding the infant, or even different stages of growth, and they'll be observing the human, how they're reacting with the child. And so, and I have many, many cases of that. We start going into that, it's even, it sounds even more like unbelievable or science fiction, but it just, back in the mid 90s, I did a lot of talk shows, flew back and forth to New York. And one thing I never wanted to talk about during those shows, because they only give you an hour, and then there's commercials in between, and it is so complicated. I never wanted to talk about the hybrid program because it's so sensational. The audience was still trying to grasp the fact that, wait, these people are taken from their homes, or taken from their cars. So, and they always, media always seem to want to sensationalize this, and it's already sensational. You can't, my goodness, you don't have to add, anything else to it. So I didn't want to open that can of worms, on a national show. So
I think we need to talk about hybrids. They're part of the equation.
it is
it
now.
seems like that's part of the mission for why they're here.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me because, so I live on a farm, and you can breed certain things, but they're also their offspring's hybrids, and those hybrids don't often breed true with each other. So you can't
Yeah.
just breed hybrid with hybrid. And it makes me wonder about, well, maybe that is why they continue to need us.
That's why, I just get that sense, I always have, that they're among us. They're probably more going to be coming down, that we don't have to worry about them destroying us or taking us over. I just don't feel that at all.
Okay. Now, earlier you mentioned about screen memories. How would somebody know that their memory is a screen? Well, first, I guess we should talk about what is a screen memory. And then how would you know that you're having a screen memory versus the real thing?
Well, these beings can make a person feel that they're looking at something that's not really there. They've used, to make them feel comfortable as they're taking them, they've used family members, images of family members that have passed on. And the person starts to feel, oh my gosh, that's my mother. Oh my gosh. And then they're feeling comfortable. And then eventually it morphs into the alien being. Of course, it makes them very upset. Or they'll make you think that you're looking at a an owl, because they have these big eyes. So, oh, I saw this beautiful white owl, that sort of thing. Um, and the example I use about the first responders in an accident scene, the lights are flashing, they see people around. That's a very common screen memory where people think it's an accident ahead of them. And in actuality, it's most likely a craft that's landed with the lights flashing and the beams are around it and they're ready to stop this car, but they don't remember that, and not until later. So screen memories can be very, very tricky. And people don't realize it, and it doesn't dawn on them many times till many years later. I had this one case, interesting. He was supposed to be hunting. He went through these bushes. This is his conscious memory. And he saw these white deer, like lying down in a circle. And that was his memory for a long time. He goes, oh my God, that's what so I put him in hypnosis. He starts talking about going through this, the bush area. And he goes, wait a minute, where's my rifle? How am I supposed to hunt without a rifle? It was really funny, just realized that. And he goes through and he starts looking at, okay, tell me what you're seeing? Is there anything there? And he's starting to see these deer, but then he started realizing they're not deer. They're not white deer. Then he started describing these beings, that were, we always call them grays, but, very pale skin and so forth. So that was very disturbing to him. At the same time, he was glad that he looked into that conscious. He goes, white deer, in a circle. I mean, that's what he remembered. You think, so sometimes it doesn't dawn on. They go, later on, he'll go, wait a minute, white deer in a circle. How could I see that? And then that's when he finally wanted to look into it. So that's how it happens. I had this one person who said she saw a 5-foot white owl in Southern California in her backyard. And it makes sense to them. Oh, and I saw this 5-foot white owl. And I'm like, oh my God. And I go, and then later on she realized, yeah, that's kind of weird. It's like, we don't have 5-foot white owls.
Right.
I'd be afraid if we did. So it's just it's interesting. At the same time, it's just disturbing because, people, they're programmed that, this is right. This makes sense to you. They don't question it. Just don't question it, and they go along like that for a long time, until they think, or maybe they read something, or maybe they see something on a documentary, that it triggers. Sometimes it'll trigger something. Whoa, wait, so it just, this, I mean, I have so many cases about that, screen memory, how it works, and how it, they think, how could I have thought that? Like, why did I think it made sense? It's a really funny thing, but also just very interesting. I mean, but I've worked with so many cases that I almost wait for these similarities. Like right before we just started the show, I had a consultation with somebody, and he just he was talking about experiences 30 years ago, and he had contacted my mentor, Bud Hopkins, but never never work together. But he had that same feeling of, waking up, and you think this is all normal, but yet it's not. And you realize later on as an adult, because these things happen in childhood, as an adult, you think, God, as a kid, I thought this was this and that. Oh, sorry, my dog's barking. But it's, And these things happen. I mean, the similarities are the same all over the country, all over the world. I have many clients in other parts of the world that they're describing all these similarities. So there's so much. I mean, there's so much. There's so much detail, and that's why I'm really, really pleased now that therapists are interested in doing this. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I won't be able to do this forever. I'm getting older, and and I think that's why I had the urgency of, I've got to get people trained, because this is going to continue way after I'm gone, and the interesting part is that these experiences start in early childhood and it follows the person throughout their lives. It's also a family affair. It affects, every generation. It's intergenerational. So I always ask about the grandparents and the parents, and then the person contacting me, and then their children, and then maybe their children's children. And this experience may lay dormant for a while. Something may not happen for maybe a year, maybe more, but then something down the line will happen again, because it doesn't just, the experience doesn't just stop. And I tell people, even people that contact me in their late 70s and 80s, what do they want with me now? I can't,
Yeah.
I can't give them sperm or eggs, and I just discovered that once they choose you for their program, that they're going to always have something for you to do. I have a lady who's in her 80s. She's taken periodically onto the ship, and they take her into the nursery, and she takes care of these babies. She bonds with these little hybrid babies, and she loves it. There's no fear there. I mean, she's been, abducted all her life, and so and who knows what else they do. We don't know, except for, of course, these abductions, these experiments, and all these things, the hybridization. But what else do they do on the ships or on wherever they're from? We still don't know.
So that makes me wonder, could you be a contactee and not an abductee? So somebody who doesn't have their egg or sperm taken, do they have any use for other people other than that?
People have said they've had nothing but wonderful experiences, and that's
Hmm.
great. I don't want to take that away from them. But what I've discovered too, some people that have said that had something happen that they weren't expecting, or they had subconscious memory, and then they came to me, and then of course the whole scenario came out. I feel that most people will go through this abduction scenario that they're not remembering, and then I find that later down the line, when the fear dissipates, then people will get messages from them. They'll actually get a tour of the ship. They'll show them where the controls are. I mean, just once that fear dissipates, because the fear, you can't look around. I mean, you're so scared, you're paralyzed. So I'm not saying that maybe all people have said they've had wonderful experiences. I mean, they may. It would be a different group of beings. I don't think it would be the Greys and the praying mantis type beings. I think they've got that agenda that they've been working with. I'm sure there are thousands of different kind of beings out there that we don't
Hmm.
even know about. People, said that they've had contact with them, that just feel, a loving presence. But I'll tell you that these beings, even the ones that do the abducting and experiments, they also do healings. There's been many healings, which, why do they do it for some people and not for others? We
Good
don't know. I
question.
wish
Yeah.
it'd be wonderful if they could cure everybody's cancer.
Yeah.
But I think I think they may choose people that, we really need this person, so we need them functioning, you know, I don't know. I mean, I don't have those answers right now, but I know that they do healings. Thankfully, they could do something like that. There have been many cases about that.
Well, Yvonne, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been wonderful hearing about all your experience and your stories. And I appreciate you sharing a topic that you're clearly passionate and knowledgeable about.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you. Yeah, I've been doing this, like I said, for 33 years. People can, if they want to read about the cases, they can find my books on Amazon. And if they go onto my website, hypnotherapist YvonneSmith.com, they can find out about the workshop and so forth. And they could contact me if they have any questions. But thank you, Laura, for having me.
Sure.
Thank you.